On the issue of invalidated FX, because I know it's a big, invalidated forward. You know, a lot of corporates suffered serious setback in terms of loss, you know, that they incurred in respect of this invalidated FX. And these are legitimate transactions that CBN ought to deliver. So what can we do as corporates to appeal to the conscience of CBN to ensure that they reverse their decision on those invalidated forward and ensure delivery of these effects? Because for every corporate that had their FS invalidated, they have lost at least 1,000 naira per dollar. So, and these are legitimate transactions that CBN ought to deliver based on the forward contract they signed with the corporates. I mean, the banks and the corporates. So, I don't know, because it also tells so much on the image of this country in terms of, you know, enabling environment for investment. So I don't know, what can we do to convince CBN to...
Thank you.
know,
I see my president will tackle that.
I think that at this conference we can be very frank as to the situation. So, like Afiz said, the CBN, when it came in, had a situation of about $7-point-something million of undelivered forwards. And for those who don't understand, and I'm saying this particularly for the press, for those who don't understand, that means that they have collected Naira, okay, promised to deliver it at a certain date, and they defaulted. We must use the word. They defaulted.
That's true.
In providing the FX. That was the situation. But the CBN came in, said, okay, we now promise to deliver the FX. Now, we know what happens when you typically have a default. When you have a default and you eventually paid, there's a penalty to it, right? In a typical environment. But the CBN came and said, okay, they will do it. And then it delivered $5 million of that, $5 billion of it. And they said another 2-point-something billion was under investigation. And that they will look at it and all that and all that. So we're patiently waiting for this. And people must understand that that 2-point-something billion not delivered represents cost that is being carried by corporates because they are import loans that have been booked. And those import loans are carrying FCY interest rates that the corporates were carrying. And the corporates face the situation of, should we provide FX to the banks so that those interest rates will stop? Okay? And if I provide interest rate to the banks, what assurance do I have when the CBN delivers, ready to deliver, give me back? There was no clarity. So what you had was a situation where a lot of corporates just waited and they were carrying that cost. The CBN came back and said, okay, they were investigating, they came back several times, and I think they asked a lot of corporates to validate their files. And we did. We validated, we provided documents to show that these transactions were legit. There were maybe a few issues with some firms, but they were not significant. And so we were expecting that at the end of the day, they would deliver on this FX. The next thing we heard was an announcement that said they had delivered completely. Now, our approach as an organization to the CBN is not to do he said, she said. We're not in the business of attacking a regulator. We're in the business of how can we work together. And that was our approach to it, to this conversation from the very get-go. So it was not a case of, oh, you said you deliver, you didn't deliver, whatever. But what essentially happened was a case where when the CBN said it delivered, it was a case of them returning the naira at the rate to which they collected it. 400, 300, that was what was it. Yeah. Completely ignoring the interest rate, completely ignoring the rate in which naira and dollar exchange today. Some of the corporates who had issues of import loan with banks had to pay loans collected at 400 or whatever, at 1,000 something. So our expectation is that, okay, if the CBN says, okay, for whatever reason, we're not giving you back the dollar, but we'll give you the naira, they will do it at current rate. But that wasn't what happened. They just said, we're going to refinance. Was that the word they used, refinance or something? Repurchase. And then, but it's at the hold rate. So that was what they meant by we have paid the 2 point something billion. During the media launch, the members of the press asked us that question. And I gave the mic to Mr. Omode to answer that question specifically because I wanted us to have a factual-based response. And the response he gave is the exact response that he has given today, which says, okay, this was what happened. But of course, it was a media launch, so we're more focused on Treasury360 than talking about forwards. Yeah. But this is our conference. This is our event. These are treasurers. If there's any place that we have to be honest with ourselves, it is here.
Correct.
And we can say clearly that those transactions, a lot of them, I can say over 90% plus of them, are legitimate transactions, and that in terms of the dollar reimbursements of it, it was not done. And my response to the media at that event, which is the same response I'm giving right now, is that our approach is to appeal to the CBN, to say that in a conversation of fairness, when you look at what the corporates are about to carry over the years, the least you can do if you determine that you don't want to give back the FX is to provide the naira at today's value. Yeah. That's the least you can do. And so our position as an association, if it's going to be reported in the press, is not to, challenge the CBN and say we're going to make things. No, it's to appeal to your sense of fairness and to your sense of what is right. And I will say this again because I'd mentioned this, at the meeting with the CBN governor that we had, that the CBN is a producer of reforms, of monetary policy, that the corporates are the consumers of that policy, not the banks. Yeah. The banks are the conduits of it, all right? And so the interesting thing that the CBN must realize is that it is these corporates who are the consumers of what is being produced by the CBN that are writing the checks for the CBN reforms. And we write those checks in exchange gain losses, in the loss of equity, in losses in our books, and in the weakness of our balance sheets. And in some cases, some companies have just basically said, we are no longer staying in Nigeria, we are leaving. Why? Because our equity has been completely eroded. So that is the cost of the reforms. And guess what? If you don't know already, the banks are not the one writing those checks, applying a windfall tax on them. So it's not the banks that are writing those checks. It is the corporates that are writing those checks. So on the basis, and I say this out, on the basis that it is the corporates that are writing the checks for the reforms of the CBN and this administration, the least the CBN can do, the government can do, when it comes to this undelivered forwards, is to deliver it at the fair value of that amount. And I leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a very strong applause for our president. I think that statement is very clear. I don't have to paraphrase it.